Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, staring at the massive alien fleet that filled his view screen. His ship was tiny compared to the giants floating in space before him. Each alien vessel was the size of a small city, their hulls covered in what looked like living armor that pulsed with dark energy. "How many ships are out there, Lisa?" Jake asked his tactical officer. Lisa Barnes checked her instruments twice before answering. 247 ships, Captain. All of them are armed. Really well armed. Jake nodded slowly. 3 years ago, Earth had sent the Defiance on humanity's first deep space mission beyond the Outer Rim. The crew of 85 had been ready for anything. Or so they thought. Nothing had prepared them for this moment. "Mike, what's the status on our engines?" Jake called to his chief engineer. Mike Rodriguez looked up from his console. "Engines are good, Captain. But if we try to run, those ships will catch us in about 10 minutes. Their technology is way ahead of ours." Amy Parker, the ship's communications officer, turned from her station. "Captain, I'm picking up signals from the alien fleet. They're scanning us with every type of sensor I've ever seen, and some I haven't." Jake walked to the center of the bridge. His crew looked at him with worried faces. They were all good people, the best Earth had to offer. Lisa had been the top tactical student at the academy. Mike could fix anything that had an engine. Amy could speak 12 languages and had decoded alien signals that had stumped experts for years. But none of that mattered now. They were facing something beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. "Amy, have you figured out what species they are?" Jake asked. "Yes, Captain. According to our database, they're called the Vex. The few records we have about them are not good." "How not good?" Amy swallowed hard. "Every species they've contacted has been conquered or destroyed. They've been doing this for 2,000 years. No one has ever beaten them in battle. No one has even slowed them down." Jake felt his stomach drop. The Vex were legendary, even on Earth. Stories of their conquest had reached human space through trader reports and refugee accounts. They were the monsters that other aliens told scary stories about. The Vex didn't just conquer planets. They turned entire civilizations into slave armies. They took the strongest warriors from each world and forced them to fight for the Vex Empire. Their fleet grew larger with every victory. "Captain," Lisa said, "they're moving toward us. All of them." On the view screen, the alien ships began to change formation. They moved like a pack of hunting wolves surrounding the Defiance from every direction. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Jake closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about Earth, about the billions of people who didn't know that humanity had just met its greatest threat. He thought about his wife Sarah waiting for him back home. He thought about all the things he would never get to do. Then he opened his eyes and made a decision that would change everything. "Amy, open a channel to all ships in the fleet. All frequencies." "Captain, are you sure?" Amy asked. "We don't know their customs. We might accidentally start a war." "Amy, we're already in a war. We just don't know it yet." Amy's fingers flew over her controls. "Channel open, Captain. You're broadcasting to the entire fleet." Jake took a deep breath and pressed the communication button. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Defiance, representing the planet Earth and the human species. We claim salvage rights to this star system under galactic maritime law. Any attempts to interfere with our operations will be considered an act of aggression." The bridge fell silent. Even the usual hum of the ship's engine seemed quieter. Lisa stared at Jake like he had lost his mind. Mike stopped working on his console completely. Amy's mouth hung open. "Captain," Lisa whispered, Did you just make demands to the Vex Empire?" Before Jake could answer, every screen on the bridge lit up with incoming signals. The alien fleet was responding, but not with weapons fire. They were sending messages. Amy worked frantically at her station. "Captain, I'm getting hundreds of communications from their ships. Most of it I can't translate, but the computer is picking up emotional markers. They sound surprised, really surprised." "Surprised is good," Jake said. "Surprised means we did something they weren't expecting." "Captain," Mike said, "their lead ship is approaching us. It's huge, 10 times bigger than anything we've ever built." On the view screen, a massive Vex warship moved toward the Defiance. Its hull was covered in what looked like living tissue, pulsing with veins of blue energy. Weapons ports opened and closed like breathing mouths. The ship itself looked alive, like some giant creature swimming through space. "Amy, are they responding to our claim?" Jake asked. "Yes, Captain. The message is coming through now. It's being translated by our computer." Amy paused, reading her screen. They want to know what gives us the right to make demands of the Vex Empire. Jake smiled. It was the first time he had smiled since seeing the alien fleet. Tell them that we're new around here, but we're fast learners. And tell them that if they want this system, they'll have to earn it. Captain, Lisa said, their weapons are still active. They could destroy us right now. But they haven't, Jake replied. That means they're curious about us. Curiosity is something we can work with. The main view screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at the inside of the alien ship. A creature stood in the center of the image, and Jake felt his blood turn cold. The Vex War Marshal was 9 feet tall and covered in armor that seemed to be part of his body. He had 4 arms, each ending in claws that could tear through steel. His face was hidden behind a helmet that pulsed with the same blue energy as his ship. When he spoke, his voice was like grinding metal. I am War Marshal Thane of the Vex Empire. In 2,000 years of conquest, no species has ever made demands of us. You are either very brave or very stupid, human. Jake stood straighter and looked directly at the alien warrior. Maybe both, War Marshal. But we're still here, and we're still talking. Thane was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something that surprised everyone on the bridge. He laughed. It was a harsh, dangerous sound, but it was definitely laughter. You interest me, human. Very few things interest me anymore. I will come aboard your ship. If you impress me, you may live long enough to regret it. If you do not, Thane's helmet tilted slightly. Well, we shall see. The communication ended, leaving Jake and his crew staring at a blank screen. Captain, Amy said quietly, what have we done? Jake looked around at his crew. They were scared, and they had every right to be. But they were still at their stations, still doing their jobs. They were still human. We've gotten their attention, Jake said. Now we need to keep it. War Marshal Thane arrived on the Defiance with 12 of his elite guards. Each guard was 8 feet tall and covered in the same living armor as their leader. They moved through the ship's corridors like deadly shadows, their weapons humming with energy. Jake Morrison waited in the cargo bay, wearing his simple military uniform and carrying only a combat knife. His crew watched from the observation deck above. Lisa Barnes had her hand on her sidearm, even though she knew it would be useless against Vex armor. When Thane entered the cargo bay, the temperature seemed to drop. The War Marshal was even more impressive in person. His bio-armor shifted and moved like it was breathing. Blue energy flowed through channels carved into the living metal. His 4 arms each carried a different weapon, plasma blades that could cut through ship hulls. So you are the human who makes demands? Thane said. His voice echoed strangely in the metal room. You are smaller than I expected. Jake looked up at the towering alien warrior. Size isn't everything, War Marshal. Sometimes it's about what you do with what you have. Thane's helmet tilted as he studied the human. You know who we are. You know what we do to species that oppose us. Yet you stand here with nothing but a knife. Are all humans this foolish? We prefer to call it determined, Jake replied. And I'm not here to oppose you. I'm here to earn your respect. Respect? Thane's guards shifted restlessly at the word. Respect is earned through strength, through victory, through conquest. What have you conquered, human? Jake took a step forward. He was now standing within reach of Thane's plasma blades. One wrong move and he would be cut in half. I want to make you an offer, War Marshal. Single combat. Me against you. Winner takes this star system. The cargo bay fell completely silent. Even the ship's engine seemed to quiet down. Lisa Barnes grabbed the railing of the observation deck so hard her knuckles turned white. Mike Rodriguez stopped breathing entirely. Thane stared at Jake for a long moment. Then he began to laugh. It was a sound like breaking glass mixed with grinding metal. His guards joined in, filling the cargo bay with harsh alien laughter. You challenge me to single combat? Thane asked when he finally stopped laughing. Human, I have killed over 300 challengers. I have never lost a duel. I have never even been wounded in combat. And you think to defeat me with a knife? Maybe, Jake said. Maybe not. But I'm willing to try. Are you willing to accept? Thane's laughter stopped abruptly. The War Marshal stepped closer to Jake, looming over the human like a metal mountain. You invoke the ancient traditions. Single combat for territorial rights. Very well, human. I accept your challenge. But know this. When I kill you, your species will be marked for conquest. Your world will burn, and your people will serve in my armies. And if I win? Jake asked. You will not win, Thane replied. But if by some miracle you do, The Vex will consider your species worthy of further testing. We will give you 1 year to prove yourselves. 1 year to show us that humans deserve to exist. Jake nodded. I accept those terms. The duel took place on a large asteroid between the two fleets. Both ships brought their crews to watch. The Vex had never seen their war marshal challenged by such a small opponent. The humans had never seen their captain face impossible odds. The asteroid had no atmosphere, so both fighters wore environmental suits. Jake's was a simple EVA suit from the Defiance. Thane's armor provided its own life support, and he looked even more terrifying in the vacuum of space. Amy Parker's voice crackled over the radio. Captain, you don't have to do this. We could try to run. No running, Amy, Jake replied. This is our chance to show them what humans can do. The duel began at dawn, measured by the distant star's light hitting the asteroid. Thane moved like liquid lightning, his forearms working independently. His plasma blades left trails of superheated gas in the thin atmosphere around his suit. Jake was faster than Thane expected. He rolled under the first attack, came up inside the war marshal's reach, and managed to score a small cut on Thane's armor with his knife. The blade barely scratched the living metal, but it was the first time anyone had marked Thane in combat. The war marshal roared with rage and pressed his attack. Jake dodged and weaved, staying inside where Thane's longer weapons were less effective. But the alien warrior was incredibly strong. Each near miss sent Jake flying across the asteroid's surface. Hours passed. Jake's suit was torn in 12 places, sealed by emergency patches. Blood floated in his helmet from cuts on his face. His knife had been broken against Thane's armor, leaving him with just a jagged piece of metal. Thane was breathing hard, too. The human's refusal to stay down was starting to frustrate him. Every time he thought he had delivered a killing blow, Jake would somehow roll away or deflect the attack. Why do you not die? Thane demanded, his voice harsh with exhaustion. Jake spat blood and stood up again. Because I'm human. We don't know how to quit. The watching Vex warriors had grown quiet. Their supreme leader was supposed to end this fight in minutes. Instead, this tiny human had been dancing with death for 6 hours. Some of the younger Vex had never seen their war marshal show any sign of tiredness. As the hours stretched on, both fighters began to slow down. Jake's movements became more desperate. Thane's attacks less precise. Blood from both warriors painted the asteroid's gray surface. Finally, after 8 hours of combat, both fighters collapsed at the same time. Jake's suit was failing, his oxygen running low. Thane's armor was cracked in several places, blue fluid leaking from the damaged biocircuits. They lay on the asteroid, neither able to continue, both too proud to surrender. Lisa Barnes watched from the Defiance's bridge, tears streaming down her face. He did it. He actually did it. According to Vex tradition, when both fighters fell and neither could continue, the challenger earned the right to speak terms. Jake Morrison had achieved something no species had managed in 2,000 years. He had fought the galaxy's greatest warrior to a standstill. War Marshal Thane pulled himself to his knees and looked at the human lying nearby. Speak your terms, warrior, he said, respect clear in his voice for the first time. Jake lifted his head with tremendous effort. 1 year. Give us 1 year to show you what humans can really do. Let us prove we're worthy of standing beside the Vex, not beneath them. Thane was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. 1 year, human. But the test will not be easy. You will face trials that have broken entire civilizations. If you succeed, we will speak again as equals. If you fail, we won't fail, Jake whispered. Humans don't know how to fail. As rescue ships from both fleets moved toward the asteroid, Thane looked at the broken human who had just changed the course of galactic history. For the first time in centuries, the War Marshal felt something he had almost forgotten. He felt impressed. Jake Morrison spent 3 weeks in the medical bay recovering from his fight with War Marshal Thane. When he finally returned to Earth, the planet was in chaos. News of humanity's first contact with an alien empire had leaked, and people were terrified. President Rachel Hayes met Jake at the landing pad. She was a strong woman who had led Earth through 2 economic crises and a major asteroid impact, but even she looked worried as she shook Jake's hand. Captain Morrison, tell me we have options, she said as they walked toward the government building. We have 1 year, Madam President. 1 year to prove that humans deserve to survive. Jake explained Thane's offer as they sat in the secure conference room. Earth's best military leaders, scientists, and strategists listened with growing concern. So let me understand this, said General Robert Hayes, the president's brother. We have to succeed at 3 impossible tasks on a death world. If we fail, Earth gets conquered by the galaxy's most dangerous predators. That's about right, Jake replied. Dr. Maria Santos, Earth's leading xenobiologist, leaned forward. What kind of tasks are we talking about? Jake pulled up the holographic display Thane had given him. The image showed a planet covered in storms and strange creatures. The planet is called Kepler 442b. The Vex use it to train their elite warriors. Most of them don't survive. The planet looked like a nightmare. Gravity was twice Earth normal. The atmosphere was barely breathable. Massive storms covered continents, bringing winds that could strip flesh from bone. The ecosystem was filled with predators that seemed designed to kill everything around them. The 3 tasks, Jake continued. First, we have to build a permanent settlement that can survive the megastorms. These storms happen every few weeks and can destroy entire mountains. Colonel David Chen whistled softly. He was Earth's best military engineer and had built bases in some of the worst places on the planet. What's the second task? Hunt and kill a Shadow Titan. It's a creature that no Vex has ever defeated alone. The few recordings we have show something the size of a building that can turn invisible and move through solid rock. Dr. Santos shook her head. And the third task? Decode the Forerunner ruins and activate their defensive systems. The Vex have been trying to do this for centuries without success. The ruins cover half a continent and contain technology we can't even understand yet. The room fell silent. President Hayes looked around the table at Earth's greatest minds. Opinions. It's impossible, said General Hayes bluntly. We're being asked to succeed where a 2,000-year-old empire has failed. On a planet designed to kill us. Nothing is impossible, countered Dr. Santos. Difficult, yes. Deadly, absolutely. But not impossible. Humans have survived worse odds before. Colonel Chen nodded. The question isn't whether we can do it. The question is how fast we can learn. We have 6 months to prepare before we leave for Kepler 442b. President Hayes made the decision that would determine humanity's future. We're going to try. Colonel Chen, you'll lead the military team. Dr. Santos, you'll head the science division. Captain Morrison, you'll be overall mission commander. The next 6 months were the most intense in human history. Every resource on Earth was dedicated to the project. The best soldiers, scientists, engineers, and survival specialists were recruited for the mission. Tom Wilson joined the team as survival specialist. He was a former Navy SEAL who had spent 20 years in the world's most dangerous places. If anyone could keep humans alive on a death world, it was Tom. Mike Rodriguez worked day and night designing equipment that could function in Kepler 442b's harsh environment. Amy Parker learned everything she could about alien technology and ancient languages. When departure day came, the team consisted of 200 volunteers. They knew the odds. They knew most of them probably wouldn't come home. But they also knew that Earth's survival depended on their success. The journey to Kepler 442b took 3 months. During that time, Thane sent them more detailed information about the planet. The data was not encouraging. The planet's ecosystem included creatures called shadow stalkers that hunted in packs and could phase through solid matter. There were storm birds that rode the megastorms and attacked anything that moved during the weather events. The plant life was mostly poisonous, and the water sources were contaminated with bacteria that could dissolve human tissue. When they finally arrived at Kepler 442b, the planet looked even worse than the recordings had shown. The entire world was covered in dark clouds. Lightning flashed constantly between the storms. The surface was scarred with canyons and broken mountains. Well, Tom Wilson said as they looked at their new home through the ship's windows. I've seen worse. Where? Asked Lisa Barnes. Tom grinned. I haven't, but there's a first time for everything. The landing was rough. The planet's double gravity made everything harder. Equipment that felt normal on Earth now weighed twice as much. Simple movements became exhausting. Dr. Santos immediately began testing the atmosphere and soil. Air is breathable, but barely. We'll need filters for extended exposure. The soil is acidic enough to eat through most metals, and the local bacteria is definitely hostile to human life. Colonel Chen scouted locations for their base. We need somewhere that can protect us from the storms and the local wildlife. Preferably somewhere that isn't trying to kill us just by existing. They found a spot in a canyon that offered some protection from the worst weather. The rock walls would break up the storm winds, and there was a freshwater spring that tested clean. Building New Denver, as they named their settlement, was the hardest thing any of them had ever done. Every piece of equipment had to be carried by hand in the double gravity. The local creatures attacked constantly, forcing them to work in armed teams, but humans are adaptable. Dr. Santos discovered that certain local plants could be modified to create a bioconcrete, stronger than anything they had, brought from Earth. Mike Rodriguez designed modular habitats that could be quickly assembled and just as quickly taken apart if they needed to move. After 3 months of backbreaking work, New Denver was ready for its first real test. The weather satellites detected a Category 5 megastorm approaching. Winds would reach over 400 miles per hour, with lightning strikes powerful enough to melt steel. The team huddled in their reinforced shelters as the storm hit. For 18 hours, the world outside tried to tear their base apart. The bioconcrete walls held. The modular design allowed the buildings to flex with the wind instead of breaking. When the storm passed, New Denver was still standing. Task 1 was complete. 2 down, Jake said as they surveyed their intact base. 2 to go. Tom Wilson was already preparing for the hunt. Somewhere on this deadly world, a shadow titan was waiting, and humanity was coming for it. The Vex observers watching from orbit were impressed. In 3 months, the humans had accomplished what took most species years to achieve. But the real tests were still ahead. Tom Wilson crouched at the edge of the shadow forest, studying tracks that seemed to appear and disappear in the muddy ground. 3 months of hunting the local predators had taught him that nothing on Kepler 442b followed normal rules. "These footprints are 12 feet long," he said into his radio. "Whatever made them weighs at least 4 tons. And according to these readings, it was here 10 minutes ago." Lisa Barnes's voice crackled back from New Denver. "Any sign of the Shadow Titan itself?" "Not yet, but I can feel it watching us." Tom looked around at his hunting team. 6 of Earth's best soldiers, all of them veterans of dangerous missions. All of them looked nervous. "The smaller shadow stalkers have been following us for hours. They're staying just out of sight, but they're there." Dr. Maria Santos joined the radio conversation from her lab. "Tom, remember what we learned about pack behavior. The shadow stalkers might be working with the Titan. They could be driving prey toward it." Tom nodded grimly. He had been thinking the same thing. Every creature they had encountered on this planet was smarter than it looked. The stormbirds coordinated their attacks across hundreds of miles. The acid worms worked together to bring down large prey. Even the plants seemed to communicate with each other. "Team, we're changing tactics," Tom announced. "We're not hunting the Shadow Titan. We're going to let it hunt us." Sergeant Mike Davis, Tom's second-in-command, raised an eyebrow. "Sir, that sounds like a really bad idea." "The best bad idea we have," Tom replied. "This creature has been avoiding us for weeks. Every time we get close, it disappears. But predators can't resist wounded prey." The plan was simple and terrifying. Tom's team would split up and act like lost, injured humans stumbling through the forest. They would use blood packs to create scent trails and noisemakers to sound distressed. Hopefully, the Shadow Titan would come to investigate. What they didn't expect was how quickly it worked. Tom had barely activated his first blood pack when the forest went completely silent. No bird calls, no insect sounds. Even the ever-present wind seemed to hold its breath. "Contact," whispered Davis over the radio. "Something big moving through the trees. 40 yards to my northeast. I can see branches moving, but nothing making them move." Tom felt his heart rate spike. The Shadow Titan was invisible, just like the reports had said. But it was also huge. Trees that were 3 feet thick bent out of its way as it moved through the forest. All teams converge on Davis's position. "Move slow and quiet. This thing can probably hear our heartbeats." As Tom moved through the undergrowth, he caught glimpses of something massive moving parallel to him. A shadow that cast no reflection. A presence that made the hair on his arms stand up. The Shadow Titan was stalking all of them at once. "This is wrong," Davis said suddenly. "Predators don't act like this. It's not trying to kill us. It's trying to lead us somewhere." Tom stopped moving and really looked at what was happening. The Shadow Titan was indeed guiding them, pushing them gently toward the deeper parts of the forest. Every time one of his team members tried to go a different direction, the creature would appear just long enough to block their path. "Stand down, everyone," Tom ordered. "Lower your weapons." "And sir?" Davis sounded confused. "It's not hunting us. It's protecting something. And it wants to show us what? Tom holstered his rifle and took a step toward where he thought the creature was. I know you're there. I know you understand me. We're not here to hurt you. Show us what you're protecting. The forest stayed silent for a long moment. Then slowly the Shadow Titan became visible. It was even more impressive than the recordings had suggested. 15 feet tall, covered in fur that seemed to absorb light with 6 legs and claws the size of swords. But its eyes were intelligent, ancient, sad. The creature turned and began walking deeper into the forest. Tom and his team followed. What they found changed everything. In a clearing deep in the shadow forest stood ruins that were older than anything humans had ever seen. The stones were covered in symbols that seemed to shift when you looked at them directly. And everywhere, scattered around the base of the ruins, were bones. Small bones. Child-sized bones. Amy, Tom called over the radio to New Denver. Get me Dr. Santos and Captain Morrison. We need the xenoarchaeology team out here right now. Amy Parker's voice was tight with concern. Tom, what did you find? We found why the Shadow Titan has never been killed. It's not a predator. It's a guardian. Dr. Santos arrived with a full science team 6 hours later. What she discovered in the ruins made her gasp with amazement and horror. These aren't just Forerunner ruins, she announced after hours of scanning and testing. They're a nursery, a place where the Forerunner species raised their young. And these bones. They're not victims of the Shadow Titan. They're what the Shadow Titan is protecting. The truth was heartbreaking. The Shadow Titan wasn't a monster at all. It was the last guardian of a dead species, still faithfully protecting children who had been gone for millions of years. The Vex don't know, Jake Morrison said when he arrived to see the discovery. They think the Shadow Titan is just another predator to be defeated. They don't realize it's protecting something sacred. Tom looked at the massive creature which was now sitting peacefully near the ruins like a giant dog guarding its master's grave. So what do we do? Our mission is to kill it. No, Jake said firmly. Our mission is to prove that humans are worthy of respect. Killing a creature that spent millions of years protecting children. That doesn't prove anything good about us. Dr. Santos was still studying her scanner readings. Jake, you need to see this. The ruins aren't just a nursery. They're connected to the main Forerunner site. This place is the key to activating their defensive systems. What do you mean? The Forerunner technology runs on something beyond just science. It requires emotional connection, empathy. The reason the Vex have never been able to activate it is because they don't understand what it means to protect something just because it's right. Jake looked around, at the ancient ruins, the scattered bones, and the faithful guardian that had watched over them for so long. A plan began to form in his mind. A plan that would complete all 3 tasks at once. Tom, I need you to do something that's going to sound crazy. Crazier than following an invisible monster into a haunted forest? Much crazier. I need you to befriend that Shadow Titan. I need it to trust us completely. Tom looked at the 15-foot-tall creature with claws like knives. Any particular reason? Because we're not going to kill it. We're going to heal it. And when we do, it's going to help us save the galaxy. Back at New Denver, Amy Parker was working frantically with the quantum computers they had brought from Earth. The Forerunner language was unlike anything humans had ever encountered. It wasn't just words and symbols. It was emotions and memories and concepts that had no translation. But slowly, piece by piece, she was beginning to understand. The Forerunners hadn't just built defensive systems. They had built something much more important. They had built a warning, and that warning was about something coming from outside the galaxy, something that made the Vex Empire look like friendly neighbors. Jake, Amy called over the radio, you need to get back here. I've translated part of the Forerunner message, and it's not good news. How not good? End of the galaxy not good. The Forerunners were trying to warn future species about something called the Devourers, and according to this timeline, they're coming back. Jake looked at the Shadow Titan, now allowing Tom to approach it without aggression. In trying to complete their 3 impossible tasks, the humans had uncovered something much bigger. Something that changed everything they thought they knew about the Vex, the galaxy, and humanity's place in it. Task 1 was complete. New Denver stood strong against the megastorms. Task 2 had revealed the truth about the Shadow Titan, and Task 3 was about to unlock secrets that had been hidden for millions of years. But with each success, Jake was beginning to realize that surviving their year on Kepler 442b might be the easy part. The real challenge was what came after. Amy Parker stood before the massive Forerunner control panel, her hands shaking as she placed them on the quantum interface. The Shadow Titan sat beside her, its massive form somehow comforting rather than threatening. Tom Wilson had spent weeks earning the creature's trust, and now it seemed to understand that the humans were trying to help. "Are you sure about this?" Dr. Maria Santos asked from her position at the monitoring station. "We don't know what activating the system might do." Jake Morrison looked around at the ancient chamber they had discovered beneath the nursery ruins. The walls were covered in symbols that seemed to pulse with their own light. The air itself felt alive with energy that made their instruments go crazy. "We've come this far," Jake said, "and Amy's translation work shows that the Forerunners wanted someone to find this eventually. They built it as a message for future generations." Amy took a deep breath and activated the interface. The symbols on the walls began to glow brighter, and suddenly the chamber filled with holographic images. What they saw made everyone gasp in amazement and terror. The hologram showed the galaxy as it was millions of years ago. Instead of the conquered territories and slave worlds of today, there were hundreds of different species living in peace. And at the center of it all were the Vex, not as conquerors but as protectors. "This can't be right," Lisa Barnes said over the radio from New Denver. "The Vex have been conquering species for thousands of years." But the hologram continued, showing the truth that had been hidden for so long. The Vex were once the galaxy's greatest peacekeepers. They worked with dozens of other species to maintain harmony between worlds. They were explorers and diplomats, not warriors. Then the image changed, showing something approaching from the dark space between galaxies. Ships that were not ships, creatures that consumed entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty void behind them. "The Devourers," Amy whispered, reading the Forerunner text that appeared beside the images. "They came from outside our galaxy 2 million years ago. They don't just conquer worlds, they consume them completely. Matter, energy, even the space itself gets devoured." The hologram showed the galaxy species trying to fight back. The Devourers were too powerful, too alien, too hungry. Entire civilizations disappeared in days. The peaceful alliance of species was being eaten alive. In desperation, the Vex made a terrible choice. To gain the strength to fight the Devourers, they began conquering other species. They told themselves it was temporary, just until the threat was gone. They absorbed the military might of 100 worlds, turning willing allies into forced servants. But the war against the Devourers was long and brutal. By the time the alien invaders were finally driven back to the dark space between galaxies, the Vex had forgotten who they used to be. Conquest had become their nature. Peace seemed weak. They kept their slave armies and continued expanding, telling themselves it was for the greater good. 2 million years, Jake said quietly. "They've been living a lie for 2 million years." The hologram shifted again, showing the Forerunners in their final days. They were one of the last free species, and they knew the Vex were coming for them too. But instead of fighting, they chose to preserve the truth. They built the Quantum Consciousness Network, the Guardians like the Shadow Titan, and the warning systems that could only be activated by species that still understood empathy. "The Devourers aren't gone," Dr. Santos said, reading from her instruments. "According to this data, they're coming back. The quantum signatures we've been detecting at the edge of the galaxy, those aren't natural phenomena. They're scouts." Amy's face went pale. "The timeline shows they'll return in force within 50 years. And this time, they'll be ready for everything the Vex learned to fight them before." Jake felt the weight of the revelation settling on his shoulders. Earth had sent him to prove humanity worthy of survival. Instead, he had discovered that the entire galaxy was in danger. The Vex Empire, for all its might, was built on a foundation of lies and forgotten purpose. "We need to tell Thane," Jake decided. "He needs to know the truth about his people." "Jake," Tom Wilson said, still standing beside the Shadow Titan, "are you sure? This information could destroy the Vex Empire. Their entire culture is based on conquest. What happens when they learn it was all a mistake? Then maybe it's time for them to remember who they really are." The communication with War Marshal Thane was the most difficult conversation of Jake's life. The massive Vex warrior listened in silence as Jake explained what they had discovered in the Forerunner ruins. The holographic evidence was undeniable, but Jake could see the conflict in Thane's body language. "You lie," Thane said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. The Vex have always been conquerors. It is our nature, our strength. Your strength was protecting others, Jake replied. Your people were the galaxy's heroes for millions of years. The conquering came later when you were desperate to save everyone from the Devourers. Thane was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was different, older, tired. I have heard whispers of such things in our oldest records, stories that the elders dismissed as myths, tales of a time when we served others instead of ruling them. They weren't myths, Thane. They were memories. If this is true, Thane said slowly, then everything we have done, every world we have conquered, every species we have enslaved, it was all unnecessary. Not unnecessary, Dr. Santos interjected. Tragically wrong, yes, but not unnecessary. Your people did what they thought they had to do to save the galaxy. The problem is that you forgot to stop when the danger was over. The conversation was interrupted by alarms from both New Denver and the Vex fleet in orbit. Amy Parker's voice cut through the static, filled with urgency. Jake, we've got massive energy readings at the edge of the system. Something's coming through hyperspace. Something big. On the view screens, they could see ships emerging from the dark. But these weren't Vex ships or any design they recognized. These vessels looked organic, like living creatures that had evolved in the vacuum of space, and they were heading straight for Kepler 442b. Devourers, Thane said, his voice filled with ancient fear. It cannot be. They should not return for decades. Maybe our activation of the Forerunner systems triggered something, Jake said. Maybe we sent out a signal without knowing it. The Shadow Titan suddenly stood up, its massive head tilted toward the sky. It made a sound like nothing they had ever heard, part roar, part song, part warning cry. Other sounds answered it from across the planet. The Guardians were waking up. Jake, Tom said, watching the creature, I think our friend is trying to tell us something. The Shadow Titan moved to the Forerunner control panel and carefully placed one massive claw on the interface. New images appeared on the holographic display. These showed the defensive systems that had been built into the planet itself. Kepler 442b wasn't just a training world for Vex warriors. It was a fortress, designed to make a last stand against the Devourers. The Forerunners knew they would come back, Amy realized. This whole planet is a weapon, and the Shadow Titan knows how to use it. As the alien ships approached, Jake Morrison realized that their test year on Kepler 442b was about to become something much more important. They weren't just proving humanity worthy of survival anymore. They were about to fight for the survival of everything they had ever known. The galaxy's deadliest warriors were about to remember their true purpose, and humanity was going to help them do it. War Marshal Thane's voice came over the communication system, but it sounded different now, stronger, more determined. Captain Morrison, my people have spent 2 million years forgetting who we are. It is time we remembered. Will you stand with us? Jake looked around at his team, Amy working frantically at the Forerunner controls, Dr. Santos coordinating with the Shadow Titan, Tom Wilson preparing weapons that might not even work against the approaching enemy. They were just humans on a deadly world, facing an enemy that consumed galaxies. But they were humans who had earned the respect of the galaxy's greatest warriors, and sometimes that was enough to change everything. We'll stand with you, Thane. Let's show these Devourers what the galaxy looks like when it fights back. The Devourer ships approached Kepler 442b like a storm of living darkness. Each vessel was the size of a small moon, their hulls rippling with what looked like muscle and sinew. They moved through space without engines, propelled by some form of biology that human science couldn't understand. Jake Morrison stood in the Forerunner Command Center, watching as the planet's defense systems came online for the first time in 2 million years. The Shadow Titan worked alongside Amy Parker, its massive claws surprisingly gentle as it helped activate controls that had waited eons for this moment. Weapons platforms are powering up across the planet, Dr. Maria Santos reported. Energy readings are off the charts. The Forerunners built this place to be the ultimate fortress. War Marshal Thane's fleet moved into defensive positions around the planet. For the first time in centuries, Vex ships were preparing to protect something instead of conquering it. The irony was not lost on anyone. All Vex battle groups, this is War Marshal Thane, the alien commander announced over all frequencies. Today we remember who we truly are. Today we stand as guardians once more. But not all of the Vex accepted this change. War Marshal Orcs, Thane's longtime rival, commanded a third of the fleet. His voice cut across the communication channels with anger and disgust. "This is madness, Thane. You would have us bow to these weak humans? You would abandon 2,000 years of conquest because of ancient fairy tales? They are not fairy tales, Corex. The humans have shown us proof. The Forerunner records reveal our true history." "I care nothing for ancient history," Corex snarled. "I care for Vex strength, for Vex dominance. These humans have poisoned your mind with their weakness." Jake watched as nearly 100 Vex warships broke formation and moved away from the planet. Corex was taking his loyal followers and abandoning the fight. At the worst possible moment, the Vex Empire was splitting apart. "Let them go," Thane said quietly when Jake asked if they should try to stop the deserters. "A warrior who fights only for conquest is no warrior at all. We are better without them." The Devourer fleet reached the outer edge of the star system and immediately began their attack. But they didn't fire weapons in any conventional sense. Instead, they began to drain the energy from everything around them. The system's star grew visibly dimmer. The outer planets started to lose their orbital momentum. "They're feeding," Amy Parker said with horror. "They're literally eating the star system." The Shadow Titan made another of its strange musical roars, and suddenly every guardian creature on Kepler 442b responded. Massive forms that had been sleeping underground for millions of years began to emerge. Some were like the Shadow Titan, huge and powerful. Others were different entirely. Flying creatures with wingspans measured in miles, swimming beasts that rose from the planet's deepest oceans. "The planetary defense network is fully active," Dr. Santos announced. "Every Guardian is awake. Every weapon system is online. This planet is ready for war." The battle began when the first Devourer ship reached Kepler 442b's outer atmosphere. The planet's weapons fired beams of pure quantum energy that tore through space itself. The Devourer ship absorbed the first few attacks, but the sustained bombardment finally overwhelmed its defenses. The alien vessel began to break apart, its living hull screaming as it died. But there were dozens more ships behind it. Thane's remaining fleet engaged the Devourers in space while the planet's Guardians defended the surface. The fighting was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Vex bioships battled against creatures that seemed to be made of living void. Shadow Titans fought monsters that could phase between dimensions. And in the middle of it all, humans coordinated the defense with technology they barely understood and courage that amazed their alien allies. "Jake," Tom Wilson called over the radio from his position with a Guardian pack. "These things are adapting. Every time we hit them with the same attack twice, they develop immunity. Then we don't hit them the same way twice," Jake replied. "Amy, can you randomize the weapon frequencies?" "Keep them guessing." Amy's fingers flew over the Forerunner controls. "Already on it. But Jake, there are so many of them, and they keep coming." The battle raged for hours. Vex ships fell to Devourer attacks, their crews dying as their vessels were consumed from within. Guardian creatures sacrificed themselves to bring down single enemy ships. The planet's surface was scarred by weapons that could crack continents, but slowly, impossibly, they were winning. The Devourers had expected to face the same galaxy they had fought 2 million years ago. A galaxy divided, each species fighting alone. Instead, they found Vex and humans working together, coordinating their attacks with technology that combined the best of both civilizations. "This is impossible," came a voice from the Devourer fleet. It spoke in perfect English, somehow understanding human language. "You should be fighting each other. All species fight each other when we arrive. It is the natural way." Jake activated the communication system from the Forerunner command center. Maybe that was true 2 million years ago. But things change. Species grow. "We've learned that we're stronger together than apart. You are human," the voice said, and there was something like curiosity in its alien tone. "We have no records of your species from our previous visit. You are new. New enough to make a difference," Jake replied. The tide of battle shifted when War Marshal Corex returned. His breakaway fleet came screaming back into the system, but not to help. Corex had decided that if he couldn't rule the galaxy as a conqueror, he would rather see it destroyed than saved by humans. Corex's ships attacked both the Devourers and the Defenders, turning the battle into a three-way fight. Vex fought against Vex while the alien invaders continued their advance toward the planet. "Corex, you fool!" Thane roared over the communication system. "You doom us all with your pride." "Better death than dishonor," Corex replied. "Better extinction than serving lesser species." But Corex had made a fatal mistake. His attacks on the Devourers drew their attention, and the alien ships turned on him with devastating force. Within minutes, his entire fleet was being consumed, his warriors screaming as their ships were devoured from the inside out. In his final moments, Korek seemed to understand what he had done. "Forgive me, Thane, I forgot who we were meant to be." The destruction of Korek's fleet actually helped the defenders. The Devourers had expended enormous energy consuming the rebel Vex ships, leaving them vulnerable to the combined assault from the planet and Thane's loyal forces. One by one, the alien invaders fell. Some were destroyed by the planet's quantum weapons. Others were torn apart by coordinated attacks from Vex ships and Guardian creatures. The last few vessels tried to retreat, but the Shadow Titan and its pack pursued them to the edge of the system, making sure none escaped to report back to the main Devourer fleet. When the battle was finally over, Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of New Denver, looking up at a sky filled with debris from dozens of destroyed ships, both human and Vex, both friend and foe. War Marshal Thane's shuttle landed near the human base an hour later. The massive alien warrior emerged looking different somehow. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something Jake had never seen in a Vex before. Humility. "Captain Morrison," Thane said as he approached, "my people owe you a debt that can never be repaid. You have reminded us of our true purpose. You have shown us what we forgot in 2 million years of conquest." Jake shook his head. "We just did what humans do, Thane. We refused to give up. We refused to let the bad guys win." "It is more than that," Thane insisted. "You showed us that strength comes from protecting others, not dominating them. You taught us that cooperation is more powerful than conquest. These are lessons my people had forgotten." What happened next shocked everyone present. War Marshal Thane, Supreme Commander of the galaxy's most feared military force, knelt before Jake Morrison. The gesture was broadcast across the Vex fleet, where thousands of alien warriors watched their leader humble himself before a human. "For 2 million years, we have forgotten our way," Thane declared. "The humans have reminded us who we were meant to be. I pledge the strength of the Vex Empire to the service of those we once sought to conquer. Not as masters, but as guardians." One by one, other Vex commanders joined Thane in kneeling. War Marshal Draven, commander of the Second Fleet. Battlemaster Kyre, leader of the elite shock troops. Even the youngest warriors aboard the ships knelt at their stations. "We swear fealty not to Earth, not to humanity's government, but to the idea that you represent," Thane continued. "That true strength comes from protecting the weak. That honor comes from serving others. That the greatest victory is not conquest, but peace." Jake helped Thane to his feet, the gesture broadcast across both fleets. "Then let's get to work, War Marshal. The Devourers will return eventually, and when they do, we'll be ready for them." 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, now serving as the flagship of the Terran-Vex Alliance. The ship had been rebuilt with technology that combined the best of human engineering and Vex bioscience. Amy Parker worked alongside Vex communication specialists. Dr. Santos collaborated with alien scientists on defense projects. Tom Wilson trained mixed units of human soldiers and Vex warriors. The galaxy was changing. Species that had lived in fear of Vex conquest for centuries were cautiously reaching out to the new alliance. Trade routes that had been closed for millennia were reopening. Worlds that had hidden in the dark corners of space were emerging to join the growing coalition. But Jake knew the real test was still ahead. Somewhere in the dark space between galaxies, the main Devourer fleet was preparing for their return. When they came back, they would find a galaxy very different from the one they had left. A galaxy that had remembered how to work together. A galaxy that refused to surrender. "Captain," Lisa Barnes said from her station, "we're receiving reports from our deep space sensors. No sign of Devourer activity yet, but our scout fleets are in position throughout the Outer Rim." "Good," Jake replied. "And the new alliance members?" "The Centauri Federation has committed 50 ships to the defense fleet. The Crystal Collective is providing advanced shielding technology. Even the Nomad clans are contributing resource ships." Jake smiled as he looked out at the mixed fleet surrounding his ship. Human vessels flew alongside Vex bioships. Alien craft from a dozen different species worked together in formations that would have been impossible just a year ago. They had earned the fealty of the galaxy's deadliest warriors not through conquest, but through the most human trait of all, the refusal to give up hope. And when the Devourers returned, they would find that hope was the most powerful weapon in the universe. War Marshal Thane's voice came over the communication system from his flagship. All ships, this is Thane. Begin patrol rotation 7. Stay alert. Stay together. And remember, we are Guardians now. Jake Morrison, the human captain who had challenged an empire and changed the course of galactic history, settled back in his command chair and watched the stars. The galaxy's greatest test was still ahead, but for the first time in 2 million years they would face it united.